Good morning, everybody. Please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of Cabinet on Thursday, the 13th of March, 2025 from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 9:30 a.m. My name is Councillor Martin Todd, Chairperson of the Cabinet and Leader of the Council. This meeting is being live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel, and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles can be switched on, and advice on how to turn these on is set out online. Can everyone please ensure that mobile phones are on silent, and can I remind members to use their microphones? In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome the members of the public to the meeting this morning? We will invite you forward when it is time for you to make your contribution. Turning to the agenda, the first item is apologies for absence, and I have apologies from Councillor Thompson. The second item is membership of Cabinet committees, and there are no changes involved. The third item is disclosures of interest. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I'm declaring a non-pecuniary, personal interest because I'm also a Hampshire County Councillor. I think there are matters within the SIL paper that include grants to Hampshire County Council, but they're obviously not to my personal advantage.
And you have a dispensation granted by the Audit and Governance Committee as well, which allows you to speak and vote. Yes, I also need to declare disposable pecuniary interest in respect of items 8, 9, 10, probably 12, due to my additional role as a Hampshire County Councillor. However, as there is no material conflict of interest regarding these items, I have a dispensation granted by the Audit and Governance Committee that enables me to speak and vote on these matters. The next item is requests from councillors to speak on specific items. I have councillors Lee, Godfrey and Bolton on item 8. I have councillors Lee and Horrell on item 9. I have councillors Lee and Bolton on item 10, councillor Lee on item 11, councillors Lee and Bolton on item 12, councillors Lee and Horrell on item 13, councillor Bolton on item 16 and councillor Horrell on item 17. I hope I've got that right, but I will work on that basis. I have 3 members of the public wishing to speak on at this meeting, all on item 7, Central Winchester Regeneration. Sorry, 8, all on item 8. Mr. Ford, Mr. Tate and Mr. Turpin. And I'll call you forward when we get to that point and after we've introduced the paper. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I ask Cabinet if you agree that these are a correct record?
Agree.
The next item is Leader and Cabinet announcements. I think we have quite a full agenda, so I'm not aware that we have any announcements. Nope. Okay. Moving on then to the next item of business, which is Central Winchester Regeneration, the Development Delivery Plan. So I will be introducing this paper. Indeed, that's what I'm going to do now. And then after that, the public will have a chance to make their points. So Central Winchester Regeneration is a vital opportunity to bring new life to the heart of our ancient city, new homes, new jobs, new businesses, and to do so in a way that's true to the city and true to today. It is a complex process. It is going to bring in over £100 million of investment to our city, and it's one that we're going to get right. This is not going to be a full start. this is not going to be Silverhill Mark II. At the moment, the difficult financial situation nationally means that many regeneration schemes are falling by the wayside, but we are not going to fall by the wayside. And while we can all get frustrated on how long it takes to make this kind of project happen, there's no price for going faster if the price is failure. There's no prize for going faster if the price is failure. And that is a price we have paid before. So what happens next? We appointed Jigsaw as our development partner in March 2023 and signed the development agreement in April 2024. And that triggered the work for our partner to come forward with the plan that delivers the objectives of our development brief. And that's what we're discussing today. Cabinet is going to be asked to agree the development delivery plan, the infrastructure delivery plan, public realm delivery plan, phase delivery plan, and the initial financial model. It will be setting the highest possible standards for an exemplary public realm, green and blue infrastructure, and the bus and highway infrastructure. It puts us on the journey for the next stage of the process. A master plan will be developed later this year, and there will be a planning application in late 2026 or early 2027. Probably talk about the exact timing later. So the paper in front of us lays out a great roadmap for the way forward, and I look forward to us discussing it today. So we have three people who wish to make public deputations. The first of those is Mr. Ford. Would you like to come forward and make your comments?
Hey everyone, just to introduce myself, I live locally on St Giles Hill. I moved to Winchester just over 7 years ago, and I remember at the time being super excited about the plans for development around this area, and indeed near the train station. And where are we now? Well, I got the email from the council saying the new plans, more than 7 years on, and there's more consultations, there's more planning, there's more delays. I just think it's super important that the council really reflects on what this tells you about the culture of the organisation, right? So let's frame, and I know it's complicated and hard, but the reality is it was less than 7 years from JFK giving a speech saying we're going to put a man on the moon, and they didn't even know it was technically possible to a man being on the moon. Okay, less than 7 years. More than 7 years, we're still producing PowerPoint slides. So I think it's super important just to reflect on that. And can we speed this up? Can we actually really get on with it this time around and make it happen? Because it's really disappointing. We owe it to the future of the city. I've got kids in this city. I don't want them to have to move into London like everyone else has to do to pursue a career. We need to build our city right now. So that's the point I wanted to make. And I think we should also reflect on how local democracy is meant to work. Because I think that this council is way too sensitive to a small number of very vocal people. Every time they have a consultation, there's vocal people. Those are a small number of people, typically a lot of time in their hands. Now, I came from London and we had something deeply unpopular proposed by our local council. And believe me, when it's deeply unpopular, you know about it. Thousands of people signing petitions, and people like me taking out time from their day jobs to come and protest. But generally speaking, councillors are elected to make decisions, and the council staff are elected to execute and deliver on those decisions. Can we not be so sensitive to a small number of vocal people who get away with everything? I remember halfway through this process, about 3 or 4 years ago, I saw some proposed plans, and they looked really good to me, yeah? And I'm sure I could have spent lots of time poking them apart. But the reality is they're a lot better than what we've got now. So why haven't we got that now? So I just want to urge the council, let's get on with this, really move it forwards, and actually, have the courage and the conviction to actually believe in yourselves. Let's not follow consultants. Let's not follow a vocal minority. Let's get on with it and rebuild the city. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much indeed. Mr. Tate, would you like to make your comments?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet regarding the Central Winchester regeneration proposals. As I've had some involvement with the concept, the idea, I thought I should put something on public record. Really grateful for what Mr. Ford has said, because he echoes many of my thoughts. The scheme is now described as a once in a lifetime opportunity rather than a once in a generation one. How long does a person have to live to see something happen here? The development delivery plan is described as a what, when, who and how, and is not a master plan. What's the difference? The paper goes on to say the council is committed to ensuring that everyone from everywhere in the district, every background, income or life circumstances has the opportunity to make their voice heard, and that their views are carefully considered and acted upon. Public opinions have been taken into account through the adoption of the Central Winchester Generation Supplementary Planning document. That's motherhood and apple pie. Then there's the golden thread of learning, reporting and feeding back. Another perhaps buzzword. I worry the financial model that has been submitted indicates that the scheme would have a negative land value. That's the worry. I've spoken to Cabinet a number of times about what I think are quite important financial decisions the council has made, and I remain concerned of the ability to put forward a robust business case. It was over 10 years ago that the Henderson proposals were derailed, and since that time all that we have had is talk and the occasional demolition of a building. And regarding the Henderson fiasco, not because of Henderson's but because of the Winchester Deserves Better campaign, and there are a number of people with knives in their backs. I believe I'm probably one of them. It is all so depressing. I can't think how many times I've said this. I've repeatedly argued that the Friarsgate Medical site could be built out now. This would kickstart the regeneration. It would be consistent with the existing plans. It is going to be residential, but putting it over to an otherwise use pending making a decision, it's dither, it's delay, it's prevarication, and as people say to me, it's an utter waste of money. And I'm grateful for what Mr. Ford said, because he was actually quite upbeat in his approach, whereas I don't feel that way. But just get on with it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Mr. Turpin.
Good morning, everyone, members of the Cabinet, members of the public, and other stakeholders. My name is Simon Turpin. I'm the asset manager of the Brooks Shopping Centre for Yarrow Estates, being the long lease holder of the Brooks. I'm a chartered surveyor, director, and also a shareholder of Yarrow Estates. And I grew up locally. I grew up in Fareham. I now live most of the time here in Fareham. Sorry, here in Winchester. Obviously, apologies. YAL is a consortium of Gentian and Flowdrive, plus a number of other private individuals who are all significant senior people within the commercial property world. We acquired the asset in January 2023, and the Brooks has become my third child. And like all children, it's had its trials and challenges, but it's also something I'm immensely proud of. We've built very good relationships with the BID, who do an excellent job, and with our freeholder, Winchester City Council. I'd like to thank the officers who we deal with, Jeff, Graham, Melissa, Michelle and Richard, who do a fantastic job. We pay Winchester City Council over £600,000 a year in rent, and we want the Brooks to be at the very heart of Winchester life. So, to misquote Mark Twain, the death of the high street has been exaggerated, but possibly not greatly. Winchester is a location that remains vibrant, very low rates of vacants at the moment. A lot of people would like to be here, but just can't find the right size space in the right locations. The Brooks itself is shortly to become fully let for the first time. permanently, which is something we're again very proud of. It's been hard work, but the requirements are out there if you provide the right space. So as I say, Winchester as a trading location has weathered the storm. However, that cannot be taken for granted. Pure Gym opening at Moorside Retail Park and the Range opening in the former home base can only draw trade away from the city centre. That is why, to us, the Central Winchester regeneration is so critically important for the longevity and the future of this Winchester as a trading location, as a place people want to come and visit and work in. Not only does the site as it stands look dreadful, it sends out very negative images to local people, as we've heard from Mr. Ford and Mr. Tate, visitors, retailers, and also investors. Having met with Jigsaw, I have absolute faith in them, in their capacity, their capability. Knowing and working with Winchester City Council as I do, I know that they share those qualities and want to see the best outcome for that site. And so from as far as myself and Yarrow Estates are concerned, we couldn't be more pro seeing the development of sustainable, high quality development take place, and as soon as possible, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much indeed. We now have councillors who wish to make some comments. Councillor Lee, would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Cabinet. I won't be picking up on all the points I made at scrutiny. There was a lot of good airing on some of the key issues and concerns. My first question relates to the Planning and Infrastructure Bill recently passed by Parliament. And I wonder how that will impact the Central Winchester regeneration in terms of its delivery, and whether any of our aspirations might be pared back. I'm thinking specifically about the new environmental delivery plan and the development corporation section. Will the developer who pays the nature restoration levy, will it apply, I guess is the first question, in relation to the development, create a shift to remote environmental benefit rather than a hyper-local for Winchester? From the way I read that, it suggests this might be an issue. And this could all potentially undermine the vital local Green Bill infrastructure strategy. The development corporation section wording includes an area on existing towns. So again, I wonder whether the Cabinet has a view on that. It might be too early, but I think it's worth highlighting and seeking a view. So moving on to the inextricably interlinked public realm, green-blue infrastructure strategy, and the movement of people and vehicles to facilitate community improvements and green growth is clearly obviously very important. And as I said at scrutiny, getting these aspects right alongside the funding investment model are critical to Central Winchester regeneration success. The future environmental challenges are manifest and the hidden infrastructure risks are real alongside the Winchester's complex historic setting around a river. With these in mind, I did, and I hope you'll just bear with me, a quick comparative analysis between Jigsaw's Igloo footprint and the Manchester Project Ignite approach to sustainable and community-focused built environmental developments. They have distinct methodologies and benefits, but I believe they are complementary. Both contribute to tackling the aforementioned issues, but they differ in their methods. In my quick analysis, incorporating some real-world project examples, I found the following. So for GDP contribution, Igloo would be supporting the local economy via sustainable construction and local business investment, great. And the Ignite project, high value in innovation in terms of smart technologies and climate finance. Igloo for green job creation creates low carbon construction jobs, circular economy businesses and community enterprises. Ignite generates high-tech jobs in AI, clean energy and smart infrastructure. In terms of investment attraction, Igloo focuses on, I believe, patient capital, ethical investment for sustainable urban development, and Ignite attracts venture capital, corporate R&D and public-private funding. In terms of sustainable business growth, Igloo develops long-term community-owned assets with green business support, and Ignite fosters climate tech startups, sustainability-driven and corporate hubs. And then very quickly, if you move on to another bit of the analysis, in terms of Igloo on the public realm and movement, my analysis shows a 70% increase in walking, cycling as primary commuting modes, improves public space activation with greenery and cultural spaces, and reduces car journey times by 35%, all improving air quality. And Ignite will see a 50% increase in public transport ridership through real-time data improvements, a 40% reduction in traffic congestion using AI-driven traffic management, and again, enhance safety and air quality with pollution monitoring technology. So in sum, I really do believe a hybrid approach by considering both these models with proven success would be brilliant to deliver a sustainable, beautiful place for central Winchester regeneration. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you very much for your time. It's now 7 years, as pointed out earlier, since the SPD for the Central Winchester area was approved after a significant public consultation. And it's over 2 years since Jigsaw were appointed to deliver this project. It's to be another 2 years before a planning application appears. So what has Jigsaw really done in that time? And how much has it cost the council? But for my main point, I want to return to a point that I've raised at previous milestones since the start of this project. That being the return that the people of Winchester will receive for the £25 million of their money that the council has invested in acquiring the land to enable the regeneration of this rundown part of Winchester. To this must now be added a further £4.5 million of SIL money that is needed to prop up the viability of the proposed scheme to deliver public realm and transport infrastructure. But I am struggling to see if anything of value in the DDP that will remotely look like a return on that investment of £29.5 million. The development brief for this project requires much in the terms of social value that might be considered as a return on that investment, including support and enhancement of the local economy, retention of young people and graduates in Winchester, delivery of the council plan objectives, provision of 40% affordable housing, and enhancing the historic environment. What have we been fobbed off with? Expensive housing with no prospect of anything genuinely affordable, but loss of a bus station to be replaced by some unspecified hub at the other side of the city. Some new retail and office buildings that are unlikely to be as popular as the low budget stores that they will replace. And possibly some public realm that will rely on the opening up of fake riverbeds to give the aesthetic appeal of natural watercourses without the constraints of reality. This paper tells us that the scheme as currently planned is not viable and seems unlikely to deliver anything of value, either financial or social, back to the council. If the Cabinet chooses to accept the DDP, what of tangible value can taxpayers be shown for their £29.5 million of investment? At a time when all councils are preparing for reorganisation and the challenges of finding enough money to fund the burgeoning social care costs, can the City Council really afford to give up over £600,000 per year income that comes from a property we own in central Winchester? So what option does the council have under the development agreement to cancel a project for a gross lack of viability? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Bolton. You also want to speak in an exempt session as well, just for clarity.
Yes, please. I'll try and steer myself away from anything that gets me into trouble, but I'm clumsy like that. Thank you for listening to me today. I echo a lot of what people have said about wanting to see this project fulfilled, although I do have still some concerns I've raised at scrutiny as well. particularly around the contribution that the project will make to economic vibrancy. The 6 dimensions, or as I think, you know, the rest of us might just classify as objectives of the DDP, not one of them mentions the contribution to economic vibrancy. It appears to be an implied outcome of the project, but it is not explicit in any part of the DDP. That concerns me because what's not measured doesn't happen in many instances, and I think that that's too important an aspect. I'm afraid I don't share one of the members of the public's view that Winchester is a tremendously economic environment. I'm actually very worried that Winchester is on a tipping point. There are many economic factors that are pointing to that, and that does concern me. And I want to be sure that this project has got economic vibrancy in its contribution to Winchester's future well established and well monitored, and is part of the objectives of this project. The other aspect that concerns me is about the viability of the project. Without going into detail, the modelled outcomes that we have seen shifted tremendously, we understand, over the last 6 months from a very large potential negative land value to a small potential negative land value. It's my understanding that of the 25 to 30 million pounds that the council will have effectively gifted to this project, the only way that we will see any return on that would be if that value becomes positive in our favour. I am concerned that we don't understand sufficiently the dynamics at play within that model. We need to be well aware of the model's volatility and the risks on that, so that we can make a judgment on whether this is likely to move over the next few months. For example, if it is very sensitive to a 1 percentage point move in base rates, we need to know that, and we need to understand what we can do about that. Also, I think it's important that those modelled outcomes are shared with members of the council, so that we can go into this project with our eyes wide open. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you indeed everybody for their comments. And we will go through, I will be asking officers certain questions to get a response to those questions as we go through. I would like to start with a bit about speed and culture. And I think it's important that people realise that the culture of the organisation, to a degree, as far as this project is concerned, is informed by the failure of Silverhill in 2016. We talked about only a few voices opposing it. Well, there were thousands of people in the Broadway. We could have had a new building in 2017. It would have been here when you moved here. You'd have hated it. You'd never have gone there, and it would have failed. So we could have built out the hated Silverhill scheme, large, bulky shopping centre with no social housing, and it would have failed. It would have been a disaster for the city. We had the opportunity to give the go-ahead to build that in 2016, and I make no apologies for being one of the people that was actively involved in killing it. This party proposed the motion that killed the scheme. We could have skipped the SPD process and set weak, or non-existent standards of design and public realm. Again, the kind of standards that led to the hated Silver Hill scheme. We could have set a low bar for the development partner, found someone who didn't care about quality, hand the site over to them and tell them to fill their boots. We could be making more money. The fastest way to do this would be to take the SPD and put it in the shredder. But we're not going to do that because we are deliberately and consciously wanting to develop a scheme that will benefit this city and is at a far higher standard than where we were before. So we had a route to do this more quickly, and we consciously and deliberately decided not to go down that road again. That we had to learn, that we had to do things differently, and that it would have a price. But that is a price that this administration, and indeed previous administrations, thought it was right to pay. And I think it's important to talk about another factor in the question of speed, which is you can plan carefully, find the right partner, and then deliver quickly. Or you can do it the other way around. You can plan quickly, pick up a developer who's more in it for the money than the quality, and based on our previous experience, fail to deliver. So I make no apologies that we've set high standards for the scheme. No apology for not wanting to make the mistakes of the past that led to hated proposals. Schemes that were so hated that the city celebrated when they were killed. That is going to take longer. But unlike the schemes that previously were put forward, these are going to be well designed. They're going to fit with the city. They are going to have social housing. They are going to have beautiful public spaces and public realm. They are going to be plans that deliver for our city. And perhaps most important of all, they're going to get built. So let me just take some of the questions and comments that have come up during the discussion. Sorry, I would actually also just like to tap into the comment that's been made by Mr. Turpin about the importance of making this work. I mean, first of all, I would like to thank you and your colleagues. The fact that you have taken the Brooks Centre, which, dare I say it, as an example, you know, if you were to run a popular, and I don't think I'm telling you anything surprising here, that if you were to run a poll with the public of Winchester, they would say, don't do that again. The fact that you're taking it, making it work, making it thrive, and will be at the point of filling it is hugely to the credit. And you have got shops in there that really add to this city and bring people to the city and give people reasons to come into the city that they would not otherwise have. And we are really grateful for everything that you say. And we share with you our belief in this city, the fact that the city is thriving. I realise sometimes people don't realise that, but when you compare footfall and vacancy rates, frankly, if you just look at what's happening in the high street, we are outperforming other areas, and we should be proud of that. And it is due to that work between the council, the business community, actually other institutions such as the Cathedral, the Hampshire Cultural Trust, and other people who are working to make Winchester a place that people want to come to, that we are in this lucky position of outperforming other places. Now, let me come on to some of the more specific points that have been made. Councillor Lee talked about the Planning and Infrastructure Bill and what impact that will have. I believe it is a bill that was published a couple of days ago. It hasn't even been to committee yet. We don't know what it's going to look like. It hasn't been scrutinised. It is not the final item. And so it is not something that we are yet in a position to factor into our plans. Obviously, we will obey the law in terms of whatever comes out at the end of the process. But I think it's safe to say that there's quite a long journey before we get there. And what comes out at the end of the process will not look exactly as it does now. So there's a limit to what we can do there's a limit to what we can do to prepare for that, although we can factor it in, but it's certainly not a basis for delaying today's decision or changing today's decision. The other change that that the Green Party are putting forward is that we shouldn't make the decision to go ahead with the current method of environmental system assessment because of Manchester Project Ignite, which I have looked into. It was an EU funded project, got about £6 million. And if I was to characterise it, it's a project to try and turn Manchester, to make Manchester a bit more like Winchester. It was to make it more walkable, get it more trees, make it a greener space with more parks and green areas. That was a very big priority within it. I have confidence. Indeed, one of the reasons we picked Jigsaw as a partner was because of the strength of their environmental assessment. And I certainly haven't seen anything from the Manchester Ignite project, and we could discuss it in more detail, which would say that we should stop the process, revisit the development delivery plan and wait, delay this till a future cabinet meeting to make a decision with a revised environmental assessment. I don't know, have we done any work to compare Manchester Project Ignite and the system that Jigsaw have in place? I mean, is there anything aside from the comments made by Councillor Lee that would say it's something we need to revisit?
So a lot of the work that was done under Manchester Ignite involves detailed design of actual projects. We're not at that stage at the moment. I don't think there's anything in that list of projects that we've undertaken that doesn't sit within the Jigsaw way of looking at the environment and nature. The footprint methodology, which we've shared with members in the past, is absolutely comprehensive in this respect. They do take their responsibilities around all ESG matters really seriously. They've published, Igloo have published their impact assessment across their business earlier on this year. And leader, we have Matt Roger from Jigsaw here. If you want to invite him to the table to answer any of the questions as due course.
I think it's probably useful so if you come forward to the table so that if relevant questions do come up, we can tackle them. We had a discussion about the money that was paid for to assemble the site, but we also had a question. I think we have assessed the value of those assets recently, and I think certainly by the time this administration took over, they were, well, certainly in March 2024, the value in the council's books is 6 million. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It was reported, there's a question at full council in January where Mr. Cole gave, who's the corporate head of property and assets, gave you that valuation. That's what the assets sit in the council's accounts as.
Looking at how property values have changed since 2019, they were worth less than that when this administration came into control. So there may have been a lot of money lost as a result of prices paid to assemble the land, but it was lost before we ever took control of the council. There were a few assertions made about the nature of the proposals. One of them was that there isn't any affordable housing. Could we have some clarity on that?
At the moment, there is both affordable housing and shared ownership in the financial model. We are trying to get to the council's policy position of 40%. I'll be honest, we're not quite there yet, but we have not designed anything yet. So we have a financial model that is based on, as I said, at scrutiny, average build costs, average values across a range of assets. And until we actually start, until Jigsaw start doing some of that more detailed design, we will hopefully then improve that financial position, and affordable housing is one of the absolute priorities.
Thank you. So just for clarification, there is affordable housing within the development delivery plan and within the financial model. Thank you. The other thing was a reference to the bus interchange being on the other side of the city. that's not correct either. I think our intention is that there is bus infrastructure and interchange within the project. Is that?
We are looking at bus infrastructure within the central Winchester area, as well as up at the station.
I think the confusion might have been that we're doing both, which is we're intending to improve bus interchange at the station and in the central Winchester area. And we're also having conversations with the county, and we won't talk about it now, about how we improve the situation for buses throughout the centre. And the discussion about the public realm, I mean, this is consistent. For example, opening up the waterways, was that something that was in the SPD? If you could remind me.
So that was absolutely one of the most popular things, as I understand it, in the SPD during the consultation of it. Everybody wanted to see that, and that's currently in the development delivery plan.
So that's helpful perspective. Thank you very much indeed. There was a discussion about economic vibrancy and whether we have given that enough priority within the plan, and maybe could we have a bit of clarification on what role it's given and how it sits within Jigsaw's priorities?
I wonder if Mr. Wilger's probably best place to do that. It's certainly there. It's in the development delivery plan, particularly around creative industries, but also places for people to visit, central Winchester, eat and drink, socialise. But maybe Mr. Wilger's better placed.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Bolton's right that it is inferred rather than explicit in the development delivery plan. It's an inference that it's important to us. A successful place is a vibrant place, and that includes its economic vibrancy as well. I do agree that what isn't measured isn't achieved, or I think the expression was something similar to that, and perhaps that is something for us to note and include in the next iteration of the development delivery plan, is some key economic indicators that we can measure throughout the process.
I think that's helpful, and that is a point here, which is what we're agreeing today is development delivery plan that we're happy to approve to move us on to the next stage of the process. I mean, maybe I think it would be helpful at this point if you could outline what happens from here and when, because that is the concern that people have. I've outlined a discussion of careful planning, careful identification of priorities, selection of partner, so that we get ready to move more quickly. Take us through what happens from here, if you could.
So the next steps are really Jigsaw appointing their consultant team. They're all ready and waiting for their approval process to kick in as Jigsaw, as both companies. That will then start work on a master plan for the site, and then that will be subject to public consultation, engagement across the district as well as in the city. And then they'll move through the RIBA stages. So the Royal Institute of British Architects have a recognised methodology for designing places and buildings, and they will work through that scope. In the DDP as a programme, which I think is probably what everybody's alluding to, that is a worst case scenario. They are based on the long stop dates in the development agreement. And I won't put Mr. Wilger on the spot, but I do know the conversations we're having with Jigsaw at the moment are trying to significantly better those long stop dates. If we get close to those long stop dates, we are in trouble. Long stop dates are there for a reason. So we are looking, I'm hoping we would see a planning application in the early part of 2026. That's what I'm currently looking at in terms of planning the team's work, and also looking at the next round of approvals that we have to come back to Cabinet for. We will have a full business case once the planning application is ready to be submitted. We have as landowner, we have a right of approval of that, and that will form the full business case, which will come back to Cabinet. As I said, I'm hoping that's early next year.
Okay, so that slightly ties into what I said earlier, which is because my understanding, because I remember meeting them, is that you have identified your partners. So there's not like you need to now go through a stage of finding out who they are. The partners are identified and in place and ready to work. And we are talking about having a planning application, which essentially is then opens the gate to start investment and building and other such things early next year. Is that correct? Matt, maybe.
Yep, that's all absolutely correct. And yeah, just to provide that reassurance with regards to the consultant team, they're absolutely there and ready and waiting. As with any organisation, we have governance procedures. Today's approval of the development delivery plan is an important step for us. It does set the milestone dates that are set out in the development agreement, but it also gives us the comfort to enter into legal commitments with our consultant team. I'd echo Ken's comments there about programme, that they are long stop dates in the development delivery plan. We will seek to better them every step along the journey. And I think when you start to look at some of the long stop dates with regards to the end of the project, we are very far ahead, and we will continue to get further ahead as we pass each of the milestones.
That's really reassuring. And actually, I think something that does need clarification, because it was raised about this must be costing the council a lot of money. So can you outline who's paying for this?
So without saying how much, because that was confidential back when Jigsaw were appointed, the development agreement allows for Jigsaw, doesn't allow for, it requires Jigsaw to pay both council's project costs, and we will be invoicing them later on this month for the first year of those, and also procurement costs. And the procurement costs kick in at each phase drawdown of land. So as we get to a start on site, that start on site will involve a payment to the council to cover the procurement costs incurred during the procurement process.
And can I just confirm as well that the work that's been done by Jigsaw since they were appointed has been paid for by Jigsaw? It's not been paid for by the council. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct.
I think that's I think that might be a bit of a surprise to everybody, because I think, this is why it's time consuming and careful work to find the right partner, and why it's important to have these discussions about what exactly the plan is, because the council isn't paying for this work. It is being paid for by Jigsaw, and so making sure that they can be confident that, we're not suddenly going to start going, oh, we hate your plan or something like that after they've spent huge amounts of money, is really important. It's the process that we're going through at the moment. And I think that might be a surprise to people. The idea that the council's actually getting paid as this process goes on rather than the other way around is probably not how people automatically assume that things are working. I'm sort of making that as a statement. Have I correctly reflected the situation?
Yes, you have.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Cabinet, do you have any questions about this? We've had some good questions from the public and from councillors. Or questions you'd like to probe with the officers or me or anybody else? We have been talking about this fairly continuously since about 2016, so we have had our chance to have a say. Councillor Porter.
Yes, I'd just like to ask, I'd really like to ask you, but through Mr. Walger possibly, that over the period of time, the process of public consultation has engendered a lot of interest, but is there anything significant that's coming out of the most recent consultations that might be information that we ought to know?
Good question. So through me to Mr. Walker, I think in this case, yes. Matt.
Thank you. I would say that and I think we've heard some of this today, that the loudest feedback that we're getting is very much around programme. Let's get this going. Yeah.
And is that what we're doing today?
It is.
Okay. Good. Okay, any other questions? Right, now we do have a request to go into exempt session for Councillor Bolton. Do you want to make some comments in exempt? I think it's important that, you know, the finances are an important issue which you talked about. So we will now need to go into exempt session in order to consider the information contained in exempt appendix to CAB 3484 bracket CWR before returning to open session to consider the report's recommendations. The live streaming to YouTube will be stopped while we are in exempt session, but will restart when we return to the open session of the meeting. Members of the public and the press are asked to leave the meeting room. Once we have finished discussing the exempt appendix, which probably won't take more than about 10 or 15 minutes the most, we will come back into open session and you'll be invited to rejoin us if you wish at this point. Once back in open session, we will move to any further debate and consideration of the report recommendations. Do I have somebody who will propose exempt? Councillor Porter, second. Councillor Lerney. Do we agree? Right, so we're now moving into exempt session. for those of you who had to step out for waiting. We're now moving into public debate. I don't know if any Cabinet colleagues have any questions that they want to ask now that we're out of that session in public session. Is there any debate? Councillor Lerney.
Thank you. As now the longest standing member of this council, this is my third time around on this, so I am very familiar with the financial models and all of the other things that we've discussed during exempt, which obviously we're not going to go into any detail about. But I think it's important to say that regeneration always takes time, and it's always much longer than we would like. The Americans did reach the moon, but they reached it by throwing absolutely billions at the project. And if we were in a position to throw unlimited sums at this project, we would be in a very different place now. Indeed, I think finally would we have it built, but we would probably have done it entirely ourselves. But in the past 7 years, we have had COVID, the economy's been blown up by Liz Truss, and now we have a right-wing American government trying to do the same for the world economy. Regeneration schemes have failed all over the country, and I think we do have to take a careful step-by-step approach to avoid the same happening again here. We have talked about the Brooks today, and although it was even before my time as a councillor, I did talk about this to the now deceased councillors in charge of the council in the 80s when the decision of developer of that was made, and it was entirely on the basis of the developer offering the highest rate of return. And whilst obviously the council is benefiting financially from that now, as has been said, it is not a loved part of the city. And while we have to stay on top of the finances and achieve best value, what our residents want to see is development not for the sake of maximising return by quickly throwing up newer individual buildings in place of old, but to provide an area that we can be proud of with improved public realm, better walking and cycling facilities, and which ensures the buses can run efficiently. And that requires a holistic view which reaches beyond the existing red line, not a piecemeal one. I am confident that Jigsaw are a partner who we can work with to achieve what we want for the city. And the paper before us today, I think, is an important step forward, and I'm very happy to support it.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Cutler.
Yeah, just to add to that, I'm also very, very confident in Jigsaw as our partner, and as a member of the joint board, would like to reassure Councillor Bolton in particular that we're really involved in the process as we go, and there are no secrets. Let's put it that way. So we know where we're going. I think I really welcome Mr. Turpin's comments about vibrancy and the importance of that to add to the vibrancy of the wider area, and I think, which is also to echo Councillor Lerney's point. That with that area redeveloped, it will have significant knock-ons on maintaining the economics of the whole High Street and the whole of the centre of Winchester, and I think that's a really important point.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other comments from colleagues? No. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for thank you to the public and to councillors for the questions that you raised and the discussion that it triggered, some of it in exempt and some of it in public. This is a really important opportunity for the city. It's been useful to be reminded by Councillor Lerney that we've had false starts and failed approaches in the past, some of which have led to buildings that aren't deeply loved. You could argue at some point the council ran a process that put up the buildings that are currently there, and I'm not sure they're seen as an absolute triumph, certainly some of them. So we've had false starts on this, and we shouldn't underestimate how hard it is to deliver and how important it is to deliver. But I think it was also very useful to hear from Mr. Turpin in particular, but also colleagues have stressed this, which is we also need this. You know, we need this to happen, and we need it to happen well. It's, you know, we can never be complacent about where our city stands and what it takes to compete with other places. We can't stand still. Other places are sorting themselves out, are regenerating their rundown areas, and we can't afford to sit by, and we can't afford one of two things. We can't afford to have another failed project. We have a long history of that, sadly, and we can't afford to do nothing. And I think we have the right partner. We have a plan that delivers the big ambitions that we set out in the SPD and in the development brief. It is clear about the vibrancy that it will bring to the city and the life that it will bring to our city. And so I think we need to approve what we have in front of us today. I have heard the comments that councillors have made about wanting to have wanting reassurance about how the finances work going forward, and I'm certainly happy to make sure that, for example, I'm happy to have further meetings with Councillor Bolton and others to make sure that what we're seeing in the financial space is properly scrutinised and looked at. And I will talk to colleagues about the best mechanism for us to do that, so that you can see how the project is progressing, and on these issues that I know are of concern to you, you have an opportunity to cast your eyes on it, because often having, you know, different people looking at things is a way of leading to better decision making. We have recommendations in front of us to approve the updated version of the development delivery plan in line with the development agreement, to approve the infrastructure delivery plan, public realm delivery plan, phase delivery plan, and the initial financial model in line with the development agreement, to approve the ring fencing of 4.5 million of silver streets, comprising 4 million from the district fund and 500,000 from the transport and active travel fund, to be used for exemplary public realm, green, blue infrastructure and bus and highway infrastructure works in the central Winchester area. Delegation to the strategic director with responsibility for CWR in consultation with the cabinet member for assets, authority to approve amendments to the development delivery plan as the design develops, and to note the submission of the initial financial model, and the work will continue on this during the detailed design pursuant to a planning application. I'll just check I'm not missed one. Cabinet, those are the recommendations in front of us. Do you agree?
Right.
Thank you very much indeed. On to the next item of business, number 9, community infrastructure levy funding allocations for 2024. Councillor Porter, would you like to introduce the paper?
Well, good morning. This is a good news report. It's nice to give away money, isn't it? But it's being given away for a very good reason. So community infrastructure levies collected from developers and combined to provide vital capital for infrastructure projects around the district. This paper provides an update on the SIL funding programme, including the amount of SIL collected as well as delivered. So these funds deliver real improvements to the communities in our whole district. That's important. And they know what they need in their community to deliver, and they make bids, and we assess those bids and give them back out again. So the council has divided the fund collected into 3 parts. We used to just have community projects and the rest, but we've now divided it into transport, active travel and community projects. And that was done about over a year ago within the cabinet. So paragraph 2.4 in the paper shows how projects are allocated to these different funds. So today we are seeking approval for a number of community projects which are outlined on page 397 of the papers today. Badger Farm Community Centre for £21,200 for acoustic panels to improve use of the hall. If you went there for your vaccinations, you'll know it's a very noisy hall. Your COVID vaccinations, it's almost impossible to hear yourself think in that hall, and these acoustic panels will greatly improve the use of that hall for all sorts of things. Colden Common Parish Council wanted to create a completely accessible play area, which would be very well used, I'm sure, in Colden Common. Curdridge, again, want to make a safe, inclusive play area. It's a real change, actually, over the last 20 years to see inclusive play areas as a matter of norm rather than as something additional. Kingsworthy Parish Council wants £17,835 to deliver the first allotments in this community, again a first for that community. And Wickham Community Centre have asked for £31,589 to add flooring, a new floor, so that new facilities can be provided at that building. The last few, Allegra's Ambition, £55,000 for an adventure gym outside the leisure centre, and then Unit 12, £28,465 for the improvement of their toilet area to include a really good disabled space and provide more space for that area. Hampshire £146,000 is being granted to Hampshire County Council for the Nuns Walk. This is an off-road footpath with real ecological improvements. It also includes money from South Downs National Park in that, and in Hebborn Worthy Parish Council themselves. So that's a really good joint project. And Week Primary School, £32,500 for cycle shelters to encourage more children to cycle to school. And finally, King's School will receive a considerable sum of £300,000 for a 3G pitch. Part of that's within the community fund and part of that is in the Winchester Fund. So an additional £150,000 is being granted for pedestrian improvements in Waltham Chase, which extends the range of that project for crossings and making it easier for pedestrians in Waltham Chase, which I know is welcomed there. The SIL collected by Winchester City Council is reported annually, and it's published on the Winchester City Council website, and it actually is in the calendar year, not the fiscal year. But the total SIL collected from April 2014, when the project was first started, or the SIL was first started, to March 2024, so 10 years, has been £22,755,636. So it's a very large sum and very worthwhile. And following agreement at Cabinet, allocation for payment for capital is made when that work is done. So if the works don't happen, we don't pay out the money. So funds are distributed throughout the year and for specific projects. So the funds move monthly, and the fund currently available is approximately £7.5 million. My thanks go to the officers on this. It's a almost monthly moving sum, and it needs very careful management. But I believe that the projects that we're putting forward today will be a distinct improvement to the facilities for the residents, and the full details of the finances are in the back of the paper too.
Thank you very much indeed. I have two councillors who want to come and make deputations, Councillor Lee and Councillor Horrell. Councillor Lee, would you like to come forward?
Thank you, Leader. A quick comment about welcoming your statement as scrutiny, Leader, to confirm that the one district approach is alive and well. And I won't quote you ad verbatim, but the rural areas will be given as much SIL as possible. So I welcome that. I'm delighted to see the recommendation 5 as outlined by Councillor Porter for the 2025-26 transport and active travel improvements in Waltham Chase for the zebra crossing on Winchester Road and other pedestrian measures. The traffic issues on the Winchester Road are a big worry for the Parish Council and the local residents, even more so now with the expected significant and large Morgan Yards development in the future. So thank you to Councillor Porter, the SIL panel and the officers for their support. And I now hope that Hampshire County Council High will get on and deliver. Much needed. The housing portfolio lead is constantly reminding me about the housing and infrastructure cost challenges and how high they are. So can I ask for clarification about the SIL adjustments annually based on building cost information services to reflect the changes in inflation and construction costs? And I also believe that we do the comprehensive review, which is to ensure that the SIL aligns with current development needs and economic conditions. So I see there's a review of the SIL charging system in July 2023, but can I ask for clarification whether a comprehensive review for inflation and construction costs beyond just the bidding allocation scoring process has been completed? I'm sorry if I've missed it, but I'm grateful for that clarification. Thank you.
And Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you for allowing me to address Cabinet this morning regarding this important paper. And I'm pleased that we have such a good cross-section of projects allocated SIL funding in this latest round. However, I have a number of questions, and given this paper has only come to Cabinet, it is important, I believe, that they are raised here for the administration to answer and to ensure complete transparency about the process. Chair, can you please explain to me what the procedural improvements to the approved SIL funding process that are going to be delegated for implementation in item 8 of the recommendation today? Are you able to share with us the 3 applications which were refused, or if not the specific applications, on what basis did they not make the cut regarding the allocation of funding? Understanding why things failed will be helpful to future applicants as they put forward their projects. In 6.4, it says very clearly that bidders are required to seek the support of elected members for a ward or parish area and to include confirmation of this in their bids. Are you able to confirm that this was the case for all bids? Because I'm aware of one allocation where, to the best of my knowledge, this has not been applied. Can you also help me to understand where I might find the monitoring of the SIL programme and progress of schemes allocated funding on an ongoing basis? It's not clear to me where that is currently logged on the system. Maybe it's hidden in the website. In 11.1, you refer to a working group of councillors. Could you please advise who were the working group of councillors? And in 12.10D, it is proposed that there should be changes to the membership of the council SIL informal panel to ensure that the most suitable representation of officers and councillors applies. Can you advise what this means and who is involved? In the previous paper, much has been made of the 4.5 million allocation of SIL funding to the Central Winchester project. Can you advise when and where this will be discussed in the context of the funding allocations and how this impacts the balances we see in Appendix 3 today? Thank you for your assistance.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. First of all, Councillor Lee, you mentioned that you wanted to know about the improvements to the SIL process, which was being raised. Thank you very much, Mr. Lincoln. That'd be really helpful if you come. And Phillips, thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful. And you mentioned that you wanted to know how it's been improved. Well, actually, we used to collect the money within planning and give it out within planning, and it's now been moved into community. So Councillor Becker and I oversee this paper ring between us, and Corin Phillips, who was the officer, has been moved into the grants system, so that the whole system is now managed through the grants department. This means that we are giving that money out as a grant from grants rather than just through the planning system. Mr. Lincoln might want to say something, or Corin might want to say something about that at this point.
Yeah, I can cover a few points. Before I moved into the communities team, as Councillor Porter knows, we did have a members workshop where we went through a lot of issues that we looked at. Sill charging was raised at the time. If I can just say that when Sill was brought in, there were certain levels that were set for certain areas within the district. That is uplifted every year with an indexing amount, which takes into account the costings and inflation. So it is uplifted every year as in recognition of rising costs. We did discuss whether we should actually review Sill charges, but it's a very long-winded process that involves looking at market research, probably would have involved bringing in consultants. And at the time the local plan was being looked at, all the information that we had for the local plan was based on the Sill charging we had at the time. So it was agreed to put that off in the interim and maybe revisit it later. So it's not off the cards completely, but at the time it was thought that we should go along with what we were doing at the moment. And it was a cross-party workshop, as Councillor Porter knows, which was really useful in shaping the strategy that we came up with that then went to Cabinet in July 2023 and ring-fenced those various amounts for transport and for community projects. So, and you know, I mean, moving forward, we can always look at having another workshop at sometime in the future.
So, thank you. I think actually the Conservative member at the time was Councillor Burns. Not Burns, yes, Burns, just Councillor Burns. Going back to that though, also at the time, the government was talking about changing Sill to IL, the infrastructure levy. They tried out a pilot project with 10 councils. It was proved completely unviable, and so it hasn't happened. And I've already put in place that request to have it as a project within the next local plan, so the one after the 2024 one. So this one will go through its inspection, but already we've asked for that work to be done as part of the work for the next local plan, so in terms of the funding process, and that's been agreed. The other point is really in terms of transparency, the progress of the schemes is transparent because it now goes through the grant scheme. It's very important that those people that apply have a conversation as well as just putting a grant application. We look at the viability of it. There's also a scoring mechanism which was introduced in 2023 following the series of workshops. That helps us to decide whether the scores are satisfactory enough to satisfy our council plan as well as and actually our requirements for Sill. On paragraph 8, it talks about procedural improvements, and actually the point is we're making improvements all the time. So that's what's really important. Councillor Horrell asked about how many councillors did actually sign off schemes and see schemes. When we came to the schemes on the day, we found that we had people that hadn't necessarily responded or hadn't been asked for theirs. We decided to carry on because the schemes had been assessed, but we know that next time there has to be a process where that is followed through exactly. It would have been unfair to say to those bids they couldn't go ahead because we hadn't got approval. So it was decided to go ahead this time, but we know that work needs to happen next time. In terms of officer panel, Councillor Lerney often joins as the councillor for transport, and we do try and make sure that we've got the people there that have the expertise in the area for which they for the public or parishes or communities are applying. It's not really much point us all sitting there if we don't know much about that particular area. And so sometimes we draw in Hampshire County Council officers as well, if that is as relevant. Mr. Lincoln, would you like to say anything about that?
Just in response to a few of the questions, you asked a question around the failed applications. Those are actually detailed in Appendix 3 to the report, which includes a summary of all the applications sets out the allocations that we're recommending, but also highlights the ones that were unsuccessful. You're absolutely right around feedback to the applicants. It's something that we intend to do. There were some of the applications that weren't successful where basically they all scored against a set of criteria, against the approved criteria for the scheme. Some of the applications, there was just a general lack of quality of the application. They could have been better, I think. So we will absolutely feedback to applicants on that. And they obviously are welcome to apply again if they can make a stronger case in future. In terms of the changes that are proposed, section 12.10 of the report sets out what are really low level, just administrative changes. Some of it's changes of terminology, titling of pots, some low level process changes. Those are the things that we are seeking the delegation, and that's what the appropriate corporate head will be looking to take forward. But section 12.10 basically summarises what the key things that are anticipated. Councillor Porter's already mentioned around the support of a ward councillor. It formed part of the scoring process that helped inform the decision making, so it wasn't a definitive pass-fail. It helped identify which applications were stronger. I think it's another thing as part of this process. What we're doing is refining how well we support applicants in with their applications. So one of the things that I think we've identified we can do a better job of is giving applicants clearer support and guidance on how to meet some of those requirements. So that would be one where we can be clearer and more explicit to them about what that requirement is. SIL panel membership's already been covered, and in terms of the impact of the SIL allocation for Central Winchester, that's not actually factored into the financial implications of this report, because we didn't want to assume what the outcome of the previous report might be. But what that effectively means, when you look at Appendix 3, which summarises the fund positions, the allocations that were made in the previous report had committed £4 million from the district SIL pot, so that would leave circa £500,000 at this moment in time. Obviously, the fund is always building up. We're collecting circa £2 million a year as it currently stands, so that fund will hopefully quickly replenish. And the £500,000 allocation Central Winchester relates to transport and active travel, means that pot would come down to somewhere just above £2 million as it currently stands. I think that's most of the questions answered. Thank you.
Great. Have we covered everything?
I think we've covered everything, because I think you just very kindly covered the SIL for Central Winchester. Thank you.
Brilliant. We've just made a decision in public that went to the scrutiny committee, indeed. Okay. Cabinet, any other questions? Any debate? Any last words on this paper? I hasten to add, not in a more general sense, Councillor Porter.
I don't think so, except we encourage everybody to make a bid if they believe they have a piece of infrastructure in their district, in their part of the district, in their ward, in their own community, that merits a bid under the scheme. The grants scheme team are always available to talk. We opened the scheme in the early autumn. We have brought it forward so that the decisions are made before the summer of the next year, and you have 3 years to spend it. And that's another aspect of this that we've changed, so that we have given a time limit on this to make sure that we can deliver the projects that are funded. And I think hopefully that will help Hampshire County Council to concentrate their mind on the Waltham Chase work as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Porter. Thank you to you and to Mrs. Phillips and Mr. Lincoln for all the work that you've done on this. I know that there are other places that either end up spending all their SIL on one building. I'm not naming any particular authority and highlighting any Fareham, and there are other people who don't manage to get their SIL away. Frankly, they collect it and don't do anything with it. And we're doing it, we're using it, we're getting it out there, we're making a difference across our entire district. I'm particularly delighted, and you might expect me to this point just to talk about the funding for King's School, which is in my ward, but which I am delighted about. But I'm particularly delighted actually about what's happening in Waltham Chase. We put in place this, we changed the way SIL works to have a transport and active travel fund, because we wanted to focus minds on getting this kind of infrastructure in place, and so I'm absolutely delighted to see that it seems to be working. It is so important that we make these changes to make not just Winchester, but our whole district easier for people to get around who are walking, wheeling, want to use active travel, and absolutely delighted that it seems to be starting to have that impact. You know, we've got other changes here that are going to deliver really important improvements on a much wider scale. I mean, that's actually the basis for the King's School new 3G pitch. It brings a lot of extra capacity for play, for sport into our area, and is a school that reaches widely across the district in terms of its catchment area. So there will be a lot of young people who really benefit from that, and I'm very pleased about that as well. I could go through them all and say how pleased I am that it's in place, but I would like to thank officers for, you know, developing a system that brings forward this quality of application, is getting improvements to community facilities and other facilities and active travel facilities right across the district. And I look forward to the next round of papers. So, Cabinet, we have a set of recommendations in front of us. We need to approve an extra £60,000 to the existing £700,000 SIL budget pot for community projects, approve the £760,000 allocation from to the community-led projects listed. Note the applications that were refused. Note that we're taking back the £300,000 that was previously allocated to the Winchester Upper High Street Contraflow cycle route scheme. Approve the funding allocation for the zebra crossing in Waltham Chase and the extra pedestrian measures in other parts of Waltham Chase. Delegate authority to the Corporate Head of Economy and Community to approve grant payments based on evidence of spend provided by the applicant. A reassuring point was touched on earlier in the meeting. Delegate authority to the Service Lead for Legal to enter into grant funding agreements in accordance with the Council's funding criteria. Delegate authority to the Corporate Head of Economy and Community to make procedural improvements to the funding process in consultation with the Cabinet member for place and the local plan. That's all the recommendations. Cabinet, are you agreed?
Agreed.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. On to the air quality strategy. Councillor Porter.
Air quality is important for us all, and this is a district-wide strategy. For good health, we all need to breathe in cleaner air, both indoors and outside our own homes. It isn't just about asthma. There's dementia, male fertility, and many other diseases from top to bottom of your body can be affected by air pollution. Lung cancer in people who've never smoked cigarettes or tobacco is now estimated to be the 5th highest cause of cancer deaths worldwide due to air quality. This air quality strategy aims not only to improve the quality of air that everyone breathes, but crucially to get people thinking about why it is so important to their health. This strategy is the product of many meetings with the all-party group. I'm really grateful to Phil Gagg of WINAC, Sarah Davis of Winchester BID, James Moore, the Director of Public Health, and fellow councillors Wallace, Councillor Bolton, and my fellow Cabinet member, Councillor Lerney, who all joined the Transport and Environmental Health officers in deciding the focus of this work. Thank you to them too. We're being very ambitious. On page 5 of the strategy, you'll see that we're working towards 30 by 30, i.e. 30 micrograms per metre of nitrogen dioxide and 10 micrograms per cubic metre for PM2.5. These are higher than the UK standards. We know that smaller particles called PM2.5 can permeate the cells in our bodies. There's emerging science that PM1 particles are damaging too. But the smaller the particle, the further they travel, wind blow, and the less we're in control. So we're setting ourselves a goal we believe is achievable by 2030. But to do this, we'll be working as part of Clean Air South to tackle this as a region. And first, we need to understand the sources of those particles. This strategy sets out higher goals than the government requires. Going greener faster will help us to do this. As we describe in paragraph 11, we are currently compliant with nationally set levels of nitrogen dioxide and hovering near the level of particulates, which are less than 2.5 microns. But we do need to do better and ensure the whole district is up to these new stringent standards that we're setting ourselves. That's a little bit complicated to say. Our AQMA is in the process of revocation, but in the document we highlight the Romsey Road, which is within national limits, but not comfortably within our own healthier targets. Only recently I've used that data actually that we've collected from Romsey Road to ask for a footway to be constructed away from a road rather than alongside it, and had approval for that. So it is working day by day. Air quality affects everyone. We want to reduce our residents' exposure to poor quality air using our planning and environmental health functions alongside housing and transport. This paper went out to consultation. The consultation responses were really useful. You can see more in the paper on paragraph 1126 onwards. They brought out the passion that many have for clear air. But it's clear that only when our residents understand what unclean air can do to the organs in their body will this strategy really have buy-in from many of the public. So public engagement is one of the strategies in this strategy. Others include air quality monitoring right across the district, including places where it hasn't been measured before, but people think there may be a problem. Transport, business and domestic heating and burning and consumption and combustion. We're already part of the Burn Better campaign with Eastleigh, New Forest and Southampton, and that will continue. The construction industry and the poor air quality that results as a result of that. Public understanding, as I've just explained, and finally, indoor air quality. Indoor air quality, including inside the car, must be a conversation in these standards too. Diagrams within the strategy include the dangers and how residents and staff in working environments can reduce their own exposure to poor air quality. This will be considered a major project at Winchester City Council and will have KPIs reported on quarterly. Winchester City Council is also part of Clean Air South in conjunction with the research team at the University of Southampton, and I'm really pleased that our own Environmental Health Officer David Ingram is a key player in that. If we achieve our goal of 30 by 30 and 10 micrograms of PM2.5 before 2030 across the district, the plan will be revised to hit even higher WH standards. The strategy document is designed that so even if you look at the infographics and don't bother to read it, you can still understand the vision, the areas of work we'll be progressing, and how Winchester City Council will be working towards cleaner air for the whole district by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Porter. When you talked about higher standards, presumably we're meaning actually tougher and stricter and lower. I mean, the lower figure, even if it's a higher standard.
Lower figure, a higher standard, yes.
Okay, so tougher standards, stricter standards.
Yeah. So the government is saying 30 micrograms of nitrogen dioxide by 2040. We're saying we want to get to there by 2030, and we can do that through our traffic standards.
Right, okay, so actually it's not it's faster rather
than
okay. So
and, well, they're allowing us to be at 40 until at 2030, but we don't think that's good enough. We're going for 30.
Right.
And the PM2.5 is something that we're introducing because we know how dangerous those PM2.5 particles are to humans, and because they permeate.
They get right down inside, yeah.
And we are looking at the PM1s, but there isn't really the research, and that will be covered within the work that's done at the Southampton University.
Thank you very much indeed. We have two councillors who want to say something about this, Councillor Lee and Councillor Bolton. Would you like to come forward? Councillor Bolton first this time and then Councillor Lee. I realise you put your name in first, but you know, I want to mix it up a bit.
As he comes to the table, can I just say Councillor Bolton was a really good contributor to this conversation. I really meant.
Yeah,
I really
wait till you've heard what he has to say. Yeah,
I really appreciated the cross-party nature of this work. Areas for all of us, and I think it was very constructive.
Oh well, thank you for that blatant piece of manipulation. Over to you, Councillor Bolton.
It's my pleasure. I wasn't listening anyway, but no, thank you. In fact, it was, I was delighted to be part of that, as you know, and do also feel passionately that it's incumbent on us to improve air quality where we can. I guess the comments really I wanted to make were I'm fully behind that, you know, as part of that group, and I'm fully behind the strategy. It's undeniable, particularly in terms of what we are becoming more aware of and understanding better, the implications of the finer particles and how they affect you know, inflammatory disease in humans as they interact at the molecular level. I guess my caution is just around what we all know is our lack of data. You know, we don't have a massive amount of data. The recording equipment is quite expensive, and we all realise that, and particularly in the wider district, that data is very poor. So I feel we have to do more there. I think in that risk universe that Councillor Cutler and I often talk about, you know, it's about proportionate and making sure that our actions are based on cause and effect, and we're not just taking a broad brush to certain aspects of it. It's certainly been the case that in conversation with others about, you know, in the district, when I've talked about the work that we're doing on air quality, there is some scepticism about, you know, oh, you're out to ban a wood burning stove and all that sort of thing. And I think it's important that we are proportionate in our actions, and that, you know, I do feel if we start going down the route across the district of, you know, you can't burn wood anymore, when actually, as you quite rightly say, it's about education. Because if we do start interfering in people's castles, they'll be out on the streets. And I think that it's a complicated picture in terms of pollution, right from the belchings of the Northern European industrial sector wafting its way across our countryside, to you know, the dust that's generated from farming. It is a complicated picture, and I think we have to do our best to educate and present the risks, gather the data much better to be able to present that, and really, I guess what I'm saying is that just really support this strategy, want to be really assured that we'll be proportionate in the way that we apply it, and that we very much stick to an evidence-based approach to trying to tackle it, and not just take a broad brush that could have some serious downsides, not least of all because there's a lot of fuel poverty in the district, and people warm their living room over a wood burning fire. And, you know, energy is more expensive in this country. I think it's 5 times that of the US, and in some parts of Europe it's 3 and a bit times. So we've just got to tread lightly, I think, and with purpose, but evidence-based, and apply that in a risk management way. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Lee, would you like to make your comments?
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Bolton is clearly telepathic, so I'm going to pick up on some of these points. But I'd just like to say I welcome the air quality strategy. I think it is excellent in its ambition, and it's good to see the changes in response to the public consultation taken in. In particular, an increased focus on the wider district and the concerns about insufficient attention to improve areas of the poorest air quality. Expanding the air quality monitoring network will be a key enabler. So really my question is, to achieve that flexibility, to address the lack of data, Will we be looking with network partners to perhaps a mobile monitoring option, such as is used by the Sussex Air Quality Partnership? Can we also perhaps consider adopting a free air alert service designed to notify vulnerable individuals of elevated air pollution levels in their area? Could also be joined up with a cold heat alert system offering advice and mitigation measures in terms of health prevention improvements to the vulnerable. It is manifestly clear why the two main pollutants, PM2.5 and the nitrogen dioxide, are the key health concerns, given their long-term pulmonary and cardiovascular conditions impacts. But it's especially important, and I see this highlighted, about the sensitive receptors such as schools, young people who may otherwise suffer from asthma, but also risks to potential cognitive impairment issues from poor air quality. So I don't think anyone can quibble with the priority. And the ambition to go and strive for beyond the current national to the World Health Organization target is particularly welcome. And it's a pity, of course, that we cannot achieve this high standard sooner. But I hope that we may be able to accelerate the achievement of that higher standard sooner rather than later. I appreciate there are lots of hurdles to that. But I think it's also worth highlighting recently the report of the improvement of London air quality due to ultra low emission zones, ULEZ, and their expansion. Whilst this initiative was initially criticised, it has been credited in a very short space of time of massively benefiting the environment and public health. Whilst I'm not advocating that for Winchester, I just want to highlight how, you know, this is manifest what people in public life can achieve when brave on actions. This air quality strategy is well constructed, but I am concerned about the lack of emphasis and explanation, because I do see it as an educative strategy as well, about the flip side of air pollution and poor air quality being the climate issue. Granted, the introduction of Para 3, which I welcome, acknowledges policies to reduce air pollution can also benefit greenhouse gas emissions. But thereafter, I don't see mention with helpful explanation for the public about this aspect. Nor do I see mention about air quality risks for PM1s, which are also known as short-lived climate particles, and the other complex risks from methane and ozone. These particles and chemicals amplify climate change and have a direct adverse effect on human health, and arguably the PM1s, albeit short-lived, are worse than 2.5. Perhaps on page 460, when there's an opportunity, we could perhaps improve and address this issue by mentioning that PM1s from both black carbon is also known, short-lived climate particles, both indoors and external sources, namely indoor fires, in cars, and external from bonfires, are something that we should be clearly clear about in terms of the risks. These short-lived climate particles from bonfires in particular, with methane, hydrofluorocarbons, also pose unique and severe risks to nature, especially to plants and wildlife. PM1s, due to their tiny size, settle deep within plant tissues on leaf surfaces, blocking light needed for photosynthesis. This reduction in sunlight impedes energy production in plants, leading to stunted growth, lower yields, and decreased plant health, in fact, impacting on farming yields. PM1s can contain heavy metals and other toxins that, once deposited on soil and water, enter food chains. Pollutants absorbed by soil alter pH and nutrient profile, affecting plant roots and overall soil fertility, with cascading effects on ecosystems. Not to mention wildlife respiratory health of animals. PM1s can also inflame respiratory issues and immune suppression in wildlife. Birds and mammals are particularly vulnerable, especially polluted urban environments where PM1s levels tend to be highest. So can I ask, when we can, at the earliest opportunity, to balance the air quality strategy with the nature element, because I do feel it is too people-centric. Now, this may be something for the nature improvement plan, but I think this would be a useful thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Lee. It's amazing we're all still alive. And I personally, you know, I know which species I am. I do support the nature emergency, but I will be unapologetically people-centric. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. I think I'm really pleased, actually, that the general direction is approved by everybody here and agreed. We had somebody on that committee who I think probably says it all. It was the Director of Public, or the Directorate of Public Health. It is at the moment, this is about a public health strategy for humans, not for animals or plants. Perhaps the next one from 2031 to 2040 might be. But at the moment, we've got a lot of work to get the public to understand. I think the three main things really: get the public to understand exactly what this does to their health. Because once you realise that, for instance, I have a wood burning fire, open fire in my house, which I use frequently. I now don't use it with the children there. So I made actions already just having done this piece of work. So I think we all know that there are things we can do in our own lives to reduce our own exposure and reduce other people's exposure. We know that, so one is public knowledge. Two is looking at the systems we already have. We have a clean air zone in Winchester, to whether we should take that further or how we manage to do that sensitively, knowing that the energy that people use outside the centre of the city and the towns is actually often wood-based or coal-based or oil-based. So we need to look at that sensitively. And we need to look as well about where all of these particles are coming from. Our weather generally comes from the southwest, and those areas are the waterside in Southampton, which can be very polluting, and we have other particles that are travelling as well. So we know that those three areas are something we've got to look at, and actually to some extent construction. The large sites, we're always asking for wheel washing, we're always asking for those sites to be cleaner, and we've got 4 major development areas going on at the moment. So we've got Wellbourne, West of Waterlooville, Kings Barton and Whiteley. They've all got a lot of construction going on, and that air must be more polluted. So that work we need to investigate further. I take your point about clogging plants. You can see that happens with dust. We used to have the Forley dust that landed on everything in quite a large amount. That doesn't seem to come anymore, but I'm sure there's other things that are coming that we can't see now. And so the impact of 2.1s, 2.5s, and we know that the ones are included in that number. If we can find out where the 2.5s are coming from, then we can ultimately then look at where the ones are coming from. I think it's going too fast to go for ones within the next 4 years. And I think the committee generally agreed that and felt that we were making, if we made good progress on 2.5s, then we were actually making good progress on the ones as well at the same time. Does anybody else, Mr. Ingram, do you want to have a comment about Clean Air South, perhaps? That would be useful.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you this morning. Before I answer that question, I'd like to pick up on Councillor Bolton's question or concerns about proportionate actions. I'd just like to emphasise the fact that this is a strategy which contains various actions for delivery, but some of those actions, for example, the issue around having a smoke control area within or including the entirety of the district, is in of itself a separate project and will be subject to consultations and will be presented to Cabinet in due course with the various findings arising from those consultations. So there is no absolute commitment within this strategy to deliver a smoke control area. It is to explore the options of its delivery, and I think that's worth teasing that out, because this isn't saying we are going to deliver a smoke control area. We're going to look into the delivery, and that will be subject to its own procedures and process and consultation. Yes, I am part of the Clean Air South group, which Councillor Porter kindly laid out, which is a collaborative body with Southampton University, the Sustainability Research Institute. It is in its infancy at the moment, but it is gathering a pace and is looking to draw upon partnership working across the region. PM2.5s, otherwise known as fine particulates, can travel very long distances. The level of PM2.5s originating inside of Winchester's district is only a small proportion of the overall 2.5s that are generated in the wider region, that then enter our district. So we don't have glass curtains on our borders. Clearly, we share the air across a much wider region. So we need to work collaboratively across the region, and that piece of work has already started. Just speaking to the point about source apportionment and getting a better understanding of where PM 2.5s and nitrogen dioxides are originating from. There is also a piece of work that has started recently. Again, collaborating with the Director of Public Health's office at the county to undertake a county-wide study into source apportionment and origination of those pollutants across the county, and that piece of work is looking to deliver that at street level. So that's an exciting piece of work that we are going to be very actively participating in. And I would just echo Councillor Porter's comments that this air quality strategy is our district response to the national air quality strategy for England, which is a public health focused approach. It's not. It doesn't seek to address biodiversity impacts or impacts on flora and fauna. Notwithstanding, those are important issues. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but that from a support perspective to the national strategy, it is public health focused, and they do set out within the legislation that PM 2.5 is their primary focus, not not PM1s, or I might add methane, ozone as well. So we are delivering on that national strategy.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other questions from colleagues? Councillor Cutler.
Really, I have a question about wood burning in the open, which I presume is the Environment Agency's responsibility. How good is the interaction between the Environment Agency taking action about wood burning in the open? And the other comment I was going to make, which is slightly separate from that, I thought Councillor Bolton raising the issue of wood, in particularly in rural areas, unless it's free, it is probably the most expensive form of energy, and so I mean that justification isn't great. And the problem is that free wood is not monitored for moisture and whatever, and is actually rates a bigger problem than purchased wood. So I was just going to make that point on top of that, but I just wondered about the Environment Agency and the interaction there.
Thank you for the question. Actually, it's us that enforces wood burning in the open under the Clean Air Act 1993 and also the Environmental Protection Act 1990, which deals with nuisance. So from the perspective of having your garden bonfire, if I can use that as a sort of a more standard example, there are no direct pieces of legislation currently in play that make having a bonfire an immediate offence. It only becomes an issue if it causes a nuisance to the neighbouring property. We are called upon many times throughout the year to respond to complaints, and we do respond to those complaints. And we very rarely do we ever prosecute, because it's really difficult to prove that there's a nuisance taking place. So we tend to deal with that through an educative approach with the person having the bonfire. This is where Campbell's service of green waste collection is really critical, because it provides that opportunity to offer that service to those individuals. And the Clean Air Act 93 basically makes it an offence for commercial businesses and or construction sites to burn materials that is likely to give rise to dark or black smoke, which is effectively toxic fumes. So wood-based products that might have been treated, for example, is a common one, and that's an immediate offence under that piece of legislation. But we do respond to those complaints as well.
So can I be clear? There's no offence for burning untreated wood, although you need to have an exemption from the Environment Agency, as far as I understand, to be able to do that commercially. But there is no offence. The other question I have is the definition of nuisance. If it causes deterioration of air quality, surely that is a nuisance in itself. And is that possible to take that approach?
It's a very interesting question. There's no case law out there that I'm aware of that renders a nuisance, if you like, a cross-channels nuisance into air quality, because air quality is about an absolute standard of ambient air quality measured over the course of a year. There are shorter term targets like 24-hour targets, which we haven't exceeded within the district for some time. So that's why our strategy tends to focus on annual means and a bonfire, because we've had this conversation with regards to bonfire night. And dare I say it, the bonfire that we host on our land at North Walls, and there is no demonstrable evidence that in of itself contributes to the overall annual mean average exceedance within Winchester. It will undoubtedly cause a particulate spike at that time, but we don't have that level of data specific to that site, and maybe that's a piece of work that we should pick up on. But that would be, from a public health perspective, that would be more relevant to persons that have pre-existing underlying conditions such as asthma, and they may not wish to attend an event of that type.
And it's an interesting example of a public health intervention where potentially having a central bonfire means that you avoid having lots of small bonfires. So that would also need to be properly thought through, because the net effect might be that actually it's better than if you don't have it in terms of air quality within the city. Be certainly something to consider or understand.
That would seem a very logical approach. I mean, we don't have parallel world where we monitor one scenario and another and compare the data, but it would make sense to take that view, yes.
So something to be mindful of, because people do adopt compensatory behaviours if you start doing things differently. Any other questions? Councillor Westwood.
Thank you. Can I just return to the PM2.5 particles? And we're all aware that the majority of it originates from outside of this district, and there's no glass walls between us and so on. So my question is, in the strategy, we clearly need to work outside our boundaries. Can you just clarify exactly what we are doing to work outside those boundaries? And are we involving our 3 MPs to work at a national level and indeed international level? Because we do get PM2.5 particles from the continent coming over this district. So just want a bit of clarity as to how we make a change to that number when most of it's outside our control.
It's a very good question. It's a challenge, would be my opener. I mean, clearly, through the National Air Quality Strategy for England, all local authorities are expected to support that strategy and that drive towards improving our air quality. We work together with our local authority colleagues across the county. So I work very closely with, for example, Amber Titchener, who's the air quality lead for Southampton City Council. They are working towards their air quality strategy similar to ourselves. And they are looking to, again, undertake a fairly similar study in terms of their source apportionment, where those source emissions are coming from within Southampton's borders. In short, through the Clean Air South group, we are looking to engage with higher level political influencers, MPs. It is still in its early stages, but as that gathers pace, I'm sure it'll gather influence and garner that support. We are certainly working with our Director of Public Health colleagues and Directors of Public Health. So Simon Bryant for Hampshire is cited on that group. Colleagues from Portsmouth and Southampton are also cited on that group. So through that collaborative approach, we are looking to improve PM2.5 emissions across the region. The international element that's another level. Yeah, that's work in progress, and I'm sure that'll be picked up on that journey.
Councillor Porter.
Thank you. Can I also say that we're very conscious of the impact of the motorways and the public transport? We have a line of motorway going along the bottom and another spine going up the middle. and the A34 as well joining it, and the A3. So we're very conscious of all of those, and that air quality is also monitored by National Highways. But because of the weather pattern, we're very conscious of the impact of those, which is why the source apportionment study is a very clear part of the first work we have to do. I'm just going to go back to the wood burning stoves, etc., outside the city. There's no doubt if you're buying a new home and you're putting a new wood burning stove in it, it's ridiculous because your home's so well insulated, you won't need it anyway. But if you have a home that's already got wood burning stove, or you're burning oil, it's often the most successful thing to do is to change to an air source heat pump. And I know that in my area and in Councillor Horrell's, many people have turned to air source heat pumps as a replacement for oil because it's been a very satisfactory outcome. And I think over the next 5 years, we will see a change in that. And it'll be interesting to see if we can measure that change in a community because of that, of those numbers. We may be able to find a way of doing some work on that so that by the time we get towards the end of this strategy, we've got a much clearer picture about that implication.
But that sounds like an interesting policy area to explore, frankly, if there's a way of reducing people's, if people are effectively forced into using polluting methods of heating because they don't have any other choice, and we can help them move away from that, then we need to understand if that's an option or if there are government funds that we can access. I mean, that seems like an action. Councillor Lerner, you're going to stick your hand up.
Yes, I'm pleased to say that government have concentrated grant funding on off-gas properties in particular. So extra funding is available for those who do have oil heating. I'm not quite sure exactly what form that takes at the moment, but it certainly does exist. And we advertise all of those schemes on our council website.
That sounds really good. And it sounds like something that we may want to have conversation about, a more targeted piece of activity to help people activate and access that, because it feels like a win. Better for air quality, better for carbon, and better for people's homes and health. So what's not to like? So that let's take that as an action. I don't think we're going to change the strategy, but let's take that as an area to look into in a bit more detail. Is there any?
To say that from that we have now incorporated our public relations team as part of our strategy team, because it's really important that we get this sort of information out regularly, often, boringly often sometimes. Thank you.
I mean, we've had quite a lot of discussion about this already. Is there any other debate that people would like to make on the topic? Councillor Lerner.
Thank you. I think it's important that we don't get too scary about this. I mean, when I lived on the waterside down near Southampton, we had our windows cleaned weekly because we wouldn't be able to see out of them otherwise. And when we live somewhere like this, without those visible industrial pollutants, I think it's really easy to be a bit complacent. We do have to accept that rural air quality can be as bad, if not worse, than in many urban areas. That's shown by recent research. It was certainly reported in several of the papers in the past few months. So poor air quality is a problem, and we need to take action without over scaring people about it. I think the air strategy is clear about the health impacts of pollutants, and it's also really important that for the first time we're looking not just at the outside environment but indoor air pollution, which is much more in our personal control. I think as a councillor and as a council officer, having talked to many environmental health officers over the years, we often learn a lot about things which we'd be much happier not knowing, and I think the impacts of air pollution is one of them. I do love a barbecue or sitting in front of a log burner just as much as the next person, and can't avoid travelling in petrol or diesel vehicles on occasion. But I think we all understand that burning things is bad, not just in statistical population terms, but for our own personal health and the health of our own families. We'll never have perfectly clean air, and I think it's quite important that the strategy is clear about that. There are pollutants which arise naturally in the environment. But what this strategy does do is it does lay out what the biggest pollutants are in our district and helps us focus our action. It very much supports existing policies on traffic reduction, active travel and electrification of transport and heating, but it also highlights some of the additional policies that we need to consider in other areas. So this continues to be a wonderful place to live. And we shouldn't be too frightened about all of this, but we do need to take action because, as Councillor Porter mentioned, we are seeing, for example, that air pollution is increasingly being highlighted as a cause of cancer and other health problems, and where we can mitigate or ideally even stop those causes, then we should be taking that action.
Thank you, Councillor Lerny. Any other debate? Councillor Porter, any last words? No, well, that seems like a sensible thing to do. Yes, I mean, as many people know, I worked for many years in the area of men's health. Lung cancer is still the #1 cancer killer for men and for women in terms of years of life lost. And that it doesn't get as much attention as some of the other cancers, but it's still the #1 cancer killer for men and for women in terms of years of life lost. So, you know, so this is still, and for many people that's avoidable. There's a lot going on in workplaces. I know in the construction industry, they have worked incredibly hard over the years to get the number of people who die in industrial accidents down. They're now realizing that there are a large number of people who worked in the industry 20, 30, 40 years before who are dying prematurely because of dust and particulates and other such things, which is why they take such a strong action on that. And of course, the other thing they've realised is that many more men in the construction industry die from suicide than from industrial accidents. And that is also a huge priority within that industry. Entirely separate topic, but an important one which this council has looked at before. This is a really important paper. It tackles a huge cause of ill health and other problems within society, sadly still a huge cause of ill health. And we are asked to approve the adoption of the air quality strategy as set out in the appendix and give delegated powers to the corporate head of service or regulatory to make any minor amendments to the strategy as necessary. Cabinet, do you agree?
Agree.
Great. I forgot to say what I wanted to say here. We've improved the city, let's improve the district, and let's work across the region to make that happen. Good. On to the next paper, risk. Sorry? I could go, or should we just crack on? We're leaving the car and just go off to DCN. They can look at me.
Sorry, you can go to.
I have a comment.
Chairman, could I go, please? Thank you.
Let's crack on. I don't think we've got much left to go. Risk management policy. We love a good risk management policy.
Well, Leader, I hope we don't rush this one because it's a very important policy. I'm pleased to present this annual review to Cabinet. Risk management is key to the day-to-day operation of the council, and the policy Appendix A sets out the detail of our corporate approach to risk management, our risk management framework and our risk assessment tool. It explains how risk management is embedded into corporate planning and operational management and how we evaluate and respond to risk. and sets out the council's risk appetite across the themes of the council plan. Finally, it explains risk registers and the methodologies for recording risks, along with the processes for monitoring and reporting risks. This annual review has removed reference to the performance panel. No, the quarterly performance reports are considered by the scrutiny committee, and has updated the previous policy in line with the themes of the newly adopted council plan. Cabinet has reviewed the risk appetite across these themes and agreed to maintain our overall appetite as moderate, but with a slightly enhanced open risk appetite within the greener, faster and good homes for all themes. This paper was reviewed by the Audit and Governance Committee on the 25th of February. The two main comments coming from that committee, both related to the corporate risk register appended to the policy rather than to the policy itself. The committee asked that corporate risk CR 011 be updated from cold weather plan to extreme weather plan to reflect arrangements in place for both cold and hot weather. And I see that this has already been updated in this paper. And the Audit and Governance Committee also asked that Cabinet and ELB consider whether local government reorganisation should be added as a new risk to the corporate risk register. I agree that as soon as there is a firm response from government to the joint submission on local government reorganisation, ELB should review this at the next opportunity. The paper makes clear that risk registers are living documents and are regularly reviewed. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. I have Councillor Lee who wants to speak on this paper.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you to Councillor Cutler. I think has picked up on the point that I was going to ask, which was I understand the council's risk appetite generally is accepted to be moderate. And you mentioned that it'll be open for going greener faster. But I suppose my question is, why shouldn't it be open across the piece, which, as I understand, is defined to prepare to consider all delivery options and select those with the highest probability of productive outcomes, even when there are elevated risks of associated risks. Surely the higher probability of productive outcomes is what we want delivering our council plan. So it'd be interesting to understand the thinking behind that. If managers are encouraged to support consider potential threats, can I ask why the corporate risks at para 11.5 reviewed for the corporate risk register do not include responding to the nature emergency and the council's capacity and need for adaptation to climate and nature risks? And furthermore, we've just had a long conversation about air quality strategy and the importance of air quality for public health. And I appreciate this is in its infancy, but I wonder again why, given our push to understand the wider implications of air quality across the district, that we shouldn't have that as a corporate risk, given its wider implications for health. And I already mentioned nature. So I believe the risk management policy example tables on page 495 and 96 of the policy underscore this need, namely, obviously, reputation and environmental and personal health pollution risks. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Cutler.
Yes, to respond in terms of risk appetite, risk appetite is very much, we have over the years looked very closely at what we really mean by risk appetite. And the reality is, as a cabinet, we recognise that for the vast majority of decisions we take around public money, being the first to innovate is not always a good move. And therefore we've settled on that moderate risk definition as being the correct definition for how we actually behave, in most cases, rather than what we might aspire to behave. Whereas with both greener, faster and good homes for all, we are open to taking slightly higher risks on this, but obviously mitigating as much as possible. And I think an example of that is the retrofit programme. there was some criticism of the retrofit programme in terms of the Swedish cottages and the costs. But we did take the risk on that, and that actually fits with both Greener Faster and with the Good Homes for All area, because we knew that the learning was important, and one could argue that it was a far riskier project because it cost so much in the end. But I think that's a good example of the difference. Whereas in general, for day-to-day approaches to things, we are dealing with public money. It is not our position to take risks, to take too high a level of risk, and that's the reality in our discussions when we've come to it. That's where we've settled, and that hasn't changed actually over time. It's been very, very clear. In terms of the corporate risk register, I think that's a matter. It is regularly reviewed. I will raise that with the senior management team as to whether they do feel that's an approach. I think it's about risk to the organisation, and the level of reputational risk around external factors, I think is limited, and whether it should be on the corporate risk register or whether it should be something that's in a risk register within the Greener Faster projects, it may be more appropriate there. But I will take that and discuss with the senior leadership team.
Thank you. Any other questions on the risk register? The risk management policy. Nope. I suppose the questions are, my question is, this is very much a continuation, and it's an adjustment in line with our new council plan priorities, but that's fundamentally what we're doing here, isn't it?
Yes, I think the two main changes are removal of reference to the performance panel and realignment of the themes within the policy with the new council plan. But what I wanted to do was emphasise within this also that this framework sets out the policies that enable the risk registers, which in themselves are really what members are very often interested in, but recognise that they are continually reviewed. I think that's an important part of the policy. So yes, that's but the changes are very limited compared with the previous years.
Well, just for clarity, by moving from the old council plan, which talks explicitly in terms of carbon reduction, to Greener Faster, which is slightly wider, we have actually, and I don't think this is a problem, I think it's something we're all fine with, slightly extended the scope of where we have a more open approach to taking risk, reflect the nature of emergency and the other things that we're looking at in terms of, our overall approach. It's a minor adjustment, but it is an adjustment in scope. It means that for things that aren't explicitly carbon related but are environmentally related, we would still adopt the same mindset as we do for carbon.
Yep, I accept that to be the case. When perhaps we didn't pick up that nuance when we discussed our risk appetite, but we have extended it. I think Councillor Lee will be pleased with that anyway. We have a more open approach to non-carbon based environmental matters, and so that is the effect of this.
Great. Okay. Any debate? Any last comments, Councillor Cutler?
Well, I just want to make a point that the policy sets out a clear framework on how risk is managed within the council, but it's crucial that this is not a policy that sits in a drawer and waits to be reviewed for next year. It should be used as the basis for all decision making in the council and sets a framework for continuous review of risk registers, as I've said. So it is an important document, even though we tend to, it's a paper that is passed fairly quickly through committees.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I think there's a very key point here. I was recently on a Local Government Association Peer Challenge conference, and one of the things that goes wrong in councils is when they aren't serious about their risk management policies. And so not just having a well thought through policy, but deeply embedding it in how we do things and having real conversations about risk. So what I mean by that is actually saying, well, hang on a minute, what are the risks? What do we think could go wrong? And having that as a meaningful conversation rather than a, oh God, it's a box we need to fill out and get through the gate, is really important. And actually, if anything, we need to continue to think of ways that we can strengthen how we have those conversations and do that kind of work. We have a simple recommendation in front of us, which is to approve the risk management policy for 25-26, the risk appetite statement for 25-26, and the current corporate risk register. So I would ask colleagues to approve that, but I'd also ask us, and this doesn't go in as a full recommendation, but it is something I think we need to do, which is to live it as well in terms of how we operate. So, you know, even as cabinet members, when we're looking at small projects, let's ask about the risks, let's ask about how they're being managed. But the decision in front of us is to agree the policy, the statement and the risk register. Cabinet, are you agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much indeed. We've been going quite a while. Do people need there's a bit of me that says we just push for the line. And yeah, I'm seeing a few head nods on that one. Okay, we're going to push for the line here. Q3 finance and performance monitoring. Councillor Cutler, would you like to introduce the paper?
Thank you, Leader. This Q3 report is the third produced in the new succinct version that was introduced this year, 40 pages rather than 120 of the old style report. It sets out for the 5 themes of the current council plan, delivery highlights from October to December 2024, the status of projects, progress against plans and measures of our performance. At section 6, there are reports of major projects under regeneration and growth, and section 7 gives us a finance report for Q3 across revenue and capital spend in both the general fund and the HRA. This report was examined at the Scrutiny Committee last week on the 5th of March, and a number of matters were raised as shown in the draft minutes. Questions were responded to by Councillor Todd and Councillor Westwood and the Strategic Director, Dawn Adey. Scrutiny resolved to set up a small group of members to discuss future KPIs with members, and similarly a group to discuss toilet improvements, and asked officers to consider arranging a member briefing on the challenges and limitations of nutrient neutrality. Cabinet, I'm happy to take questions on the paper, and this may be an opportunity for Cabinet members to expand on some of the areas raised at the Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you very much indeed. We have 2 councillors that wish to speak on this. Councillor Lee, would you like to go first?
Thank you. I'll try and keep this brief because it's been well-aired scrutiny. Just wanted to pick up, firstly, to thank Councillor Lerney for discussing a number of aspects on what I'm just about to say, which is the climate emergency district delivery and the challenges. So my ask really is, obviously this is a backward-looking report, and I don't really want to upset the brevity of the report by asking for something which just expands that. But I just wonder whether it's possible to include in future reports a little bit more informative outline of what's coming to address the big challenges reducing our district carbon emissions. So obviously we're looking backwards. I think that might just be helpful. And I just wanted to unpick and replay a conversation which I know the leader picked up on when I mentioned the scrutiny, and that is my concerns about the forthcoming 62% increase in the number of houses as part of the National Planning Policy Framework targets. Now, obviously, that means for those additional houses and possible infrastructure, there's going to be a heavy carbon burden. And Of course, the new local plan, when we receive that, is going to have our LETI standard, and it's going to tackle the operational carbon. But unfortunately, the embodied carbon is just a case of tracking that rather than taking proactive action. So I calculate 64,000 tonnes of carbon emissions as a result of this increase in housing, of which we're going to abate up to maybe 50% through our LETI operational carbon actions, hopefully through new planning policies, but it's the embodied carbon which is not going to be tackled. So I think it's worth highlighting that, and again I ask for that clarity to perhaps be maintained as we go forward in our reports. So is it possible to ask for something that can be done in the council to do some carbon accounting to understand what that front loading emission reduction requirement is going to be to mitigate what's coming down the line, notwithstanding that LETI and carbon neutrality in our new local plan is going to be obviously helping considerably. I think that's all I need to say on that. And just to say, I look forward to the nutrient mitigation solution little working group that HEP is going to be setting up to perhaps identify some improvements to what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. This meeting is about tracking the performance. It's not about a discussion about the carbon neutrality action plan. And there's one very important clarification. I made it before, I'll make it again. We do not have a 62% increase in houses planned for the Winchester district. We have a 62% increase from the old government target to the new government target. But as an increase, that does not mean a 62% increase in the number of houses in the Winchester district, which would be 30,000 houses, and nobody is proposing that at the current time. Although I'm sure if we wait, a government will come along that has a go. Anyway, we also have Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. Now, this is brief. Just wanted to clarify, you very kindly opened the door in scrutiny the other day to reviewing the KPIs for economic vibrancy, and you touched on the possibility of looking at those KPIs. Is it and the reason you gave at that time was because of the local plan, the new local plan. Sorry, council plan. Yeah, should have done this with notes, shouldn't I? And I just wanted to get clarification as to how that would work, how I could feed in some ideas to you, and if there was a plan generally to open that up to the other KPIs in the report. Thank you.
I got asked that. Do you want? Well, I mean, the answer is, of course, it's open to any KPI that's for discussion. And I think the idea was that we would have an informal meeting with officers to go through. So the scrutiny report, what was resolved is officers in liaison with the chairperson arranged for a follow-up meeting with a small group of members to discuss existing and future KPIs used within the quarterly reports. I think either myself or Councillor Cutler would attend that as well. And that's what we're going to do. We were asked for it to do by scrutiny. We're going to do it.
And does that involve opening it up to other council members like me, for example? Because you did invite me to send you those things at the time. That's why I was wanting to clarify.
I think that's a matter for the chairperson of scrutiny in terms of the specific scrutiny work. I think it's a fair challenge to think about how we involve members more widely in that discussion. I think it could be, shall we say, a discussion of the willing. Feels like the right way to handle it, but that's more for Councillor Cutler since he's going to be in the meeting than me. Go on, what would you like to?
Certainly. I mean, I think we'll talk with Simon Howson as to what the most appropriate approach is, but we will certainly take up the resolution of the scrutiny committee and work on the most practical method for engaging those members that are interested. I think that Councillor Todd makes the point. There are a few members who are very keen on KPIs, those should be the people in the room. And could I just, also to answer Councillor Lee's points, I think there is always a tension here, but this is a tracker report for Q3. What goes in that report is based around the policies that we have and the projects we have in place. And I think virtually everything you raised were things that need dealing with through Councillor Lerney, and then if it's then appropriate to be monitoring those through the report, that would be the approach to do it. I can understand how, because this is a broad report across the whole council, it does raise a whole lot of issues. But what we've got to be very careful about is this is about tracking what's already been agreed. If you want to agree new things, that goes through the appropriate area. But I'm not suggesting it's not a forum to raise those things. But I don't think we can actually agree to add them to this particular report before it becomes part of the broader policy.
Great. Any other questions from Cabinet colleagues on the paper in front of us? I think we've all seen it a few times, and some of us saw it at scrutiny and had our chance to comment then. No. Any debate? I'm not hearing any. Any last thoughts, Councillor Cutler?
Well, once again, I'd like to thank Simon Howson for producing the report and for the clarity of it. And I do think it is a very useful report for stimulating further debate but also just purely as a tracker of progress. So yes, just like the support of Cabinet to.
No, I strongly agree with your point. I mean, it is a report that, firstly, it's quite light touch, so it isn't something that's like tons of work. I mean, it is work. I'm not underplaying it, but it's not something where the entire organisation does nothing but fill out this report for a month. I'm getting a look from Ms. Keys that suggests she does actually do that, but for the finance section. But it is really helpful. It provides a really useful base for kind of focused discussions in scrutiny and other places about how the council's performing. It is particularly useful, I think, that it goes to scrutiny and that we have that discussion there. And I'm pleased that we've got actions coming out that relate to how we can work with the scrutiny committee to make it serve both our needs better. The recommendation in front of us, I think, is to note the progress achieved. And I would like to thank not just the people who put together the report, but also the people who did the progress that is being achieved and reported. There's so many council officers work incredibly hard right across the organisation to deliver the long list of impressive achievements laid out in this report, and I would like to thank them for all of their work on that. So, Cabinet, will you note the report with me?
Noted.
And although it's not in the minutes, celebrate and thank those involved for the work that has been done. Let's keep moving, and the last item of nearly the last item of business, item 13, Venter Living business plan. Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Leader. The councillor, as shareholder, must agree the Venter Living business plan on an annual basis. The business plan for the period 2025-26 was presented and debated at Cabinet Committee Housing on the 3rd of February, where both the main paper and the exempt appendices were questioned and reviewed. The committee agreed to recommend to Cabinet that the updated financial business plan, as included in exempt appendices A and B of the report, be recommended for approval to Cabinet. As an update from that meeting, I'm pleased to say that all 41 homes have now been let. Thank you.
Great, that was quick. Thank you. Councillor Lee. No, Councillor Horrell, you go first because you want to do something in exempt as well. don't you? Which we'll do in a minute.
Chair, thank you for allowing me to address Cabinet again on this important initiative within the housing portfolio. Councillor Westwood has just answered one of my questions, which is how many of the 41 flats are now occupied. Great news. However, that was tabled as one of the reasons why there was not further activity from the company in terms of its focus on letting all of the homes. We are desperate for more homes in the district, particularly affordable. And so therefore the key question I'm asking is, why is there no proposal in the main body of the report to expand the remit of the company in 25-26, given that need? And given that the council worked long and hard to actually establish the company over a significant period of time, and therefore to make the most of this vehicle in our efforts to add to the housing opportunities in our district. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Telepathy is at play again. Councillor Westwood has answered my question. Thank you. But I note, as picking up on what Councillor Horrocks just said, I note there are no proposals to expand the remit of the Venta Living Company. But I did note the statement that if a business case can be made for future opportunities, it should be considered to fulfil the council's policy objective to provide homes for all. So can I ask, is there any thoughts to looking at more ambition to provide homes for all with respect to this Venta Living entity, and growing the demand of affordable social housing by perhaps creating a small housing team that can build sites, perhaps not a huge number per year, to help address the need, possibly accessing brownfield land grants and money from Homes England. This possibly could also help control maybe some of the costs in delivering housing in the current financial pressures. That's simply my question. I look forward to a response. Thank you.
Councillor Westwood, some questions for you.
Thank you, Leader. In answer to Councillor Horrocks' question around expanding this business, then the Venta Living provides market priced housing for rent. The requirement we're addressing at the moment is for affordable housing. So our focus is on affordable housing at present. In terms of Councillor Lee and building sites and expanding the use of the business in that manner, as you're well aware, and you alluded to earlier in this meeting, actually, the economic viability of building is challenging, to say the least. And the New Homes Board meets on a monthly basis. We review all schemes that are in our pipeline. Some of those could be build schemes, and as and when we see the opportunity to take schemes forward, then we will consider the use of Venta Living as a vehicle for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need to have a quick conversation about building versus buying and the investment environment? I mean, we've talked about that before. There was a specific point that.
But can you believe it's relevant?
Well, I realise it isn't relevant. In theory, a company can do anything. So when we set it up, that wasn't our intention, I don't think, was it? Maybe we just quickly recap why. Councillor Cutler, you want to respond or comment?
Well, I think we do need to be clear. Venta Living was set up to deal with a very specific circumstance, which was to provide a form of accommodation with market rents and shared ownership in the city that there was a shortage of, but it didn't fall within the affordable housing element within the HRA. That's what it was set up to do. That's what it is doing at the moment. And if there were other areas where we recognised there was a shortfall within the market, a desperate shortfall, and there were viable schemes, they could be implemented through Venture Living. But as Councillor Westwood has pointed out, the priority at the moment within the HRA is, first of all, the provision of affordable housing, which doesn't come within the Venture Living thing. If schemes arose that were viable, surely we have the vehicle there. But the decision at the time with the housing company was always taken to keep it very narrow with what it does, because so many councils have created housing companies that have had a broad remit and have contributed to the extreme financial problems that those councils have ended up with.
Yes, I think that's very helpful. Thank you. I mean, essentially what we're saying is it's a system. We have the HRA, which does affordable housing, builds affordable housing if the business case adds up, buys affordable housing in other circumstances, lets, manages and runs it. But there are certain types of lettable housing which we can't do within the HRA, and the housing company allows us to do that. So that's the simple way of putting it. That's the scope, and I think that's the scope we want to stay with. That's my question to you, Councillor Westwood. Is that the scope we want to stay with?
Absolutely.
Right. Good. Any other questions to Councillor Westwood from Cabinet members that we'll have in public session? And we have a request from Councillor Horrell to go into private session to talk about the plan in exempt. So we now need to go into exempt session in order to consider the information contained with the exempt appendix to appendices to CAB 3482H brackets Venter before returning to open session to consider the report's recommendations. The live video streaming to YouTube will be stopped while we're in the exempt session, but will restart when we return to the open session of the meeting. Members of the public and the press are asked to leave the meeting room, even though they're not here at the moment. Once we have finished discussing the exempt appendix, we'll come back into open session. Anybody who wants to come back in can. Once back in the open session, we move to any further debate and consideration of the report recommendations. So, does somebody want to propose exempt? Councillor Lerney. Somebody want to second? Councillor Becker. Thank you very much indeed. Is that agreed? Agreed. Right. Please stop the stream. us. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Welcome back. We've had a brief discussion about one of the exempt appendices in the Venta Living business plan. We're now in a position, I think, to have final discussion and debate. There are interesting discussions to be had about the changing policy environment nationally in terms of the private rented sector, in terms of social housing, what the output of the spending review is going to be and its impact on housing, but they lay wildly beyond the scope of this paper, which is to agree the business plan that has been submitted to us by Venta Living. Colleagues, do we have any further debate on the issue? Do we have any last thoughts from you, Councillor Westwood?
Let's just say I'm delighted that Venta Living has been able to let all 41 units. Congratulate them on that, and thank you.
No, absolutely. That is great. That is what we tasked them to do. So, colleagues, we have the recommendation to approve the financial business plan as recommended by Cabinet Committee Housing. As talked, this is doing what we asked it to do. The flats that we asked them to manage have been let. So, Cabinet, would you like to approve the business plan? Thank you very much indeed. We're nearly there. Item 14 is to note items for future consideration. And nobody wants to speak on it. So would we like to note the forward plan? And is there anything else after that? No. So the exempt items that are shown as items 15, 16 and 17 have already been dealt with. So with that, I declare the meeting closed. And